Great, and we are so thrilled to have Scott Cardwell joining us all the way from summer in New Zealand today. And we are hosted today by our faculty from Northeastern University London, Sean Joel-Edgar. So I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So welcome, Scott. This is really lovely that you're able to talk to us about ImmerseMe. I know, and thank you for navigating the time differences and everything. It's very, very much appreciated. Um, this is ImmerseMe is something I first knew about through my son, actually, my son's education, and really loved it. And then we had follow-up conversations around some of Malika's research around the use of AI within immersive education. And so, yeah, it's really, really, really interesting stuff that you're working on. So it's a thrill to have you talk about, how you got into the industry, the company itself, what you're working on, what you're developing, what you're developing for the future as well. So it's fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to yourself to just give us some a bit of an overview and talk, please, Scott.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks everybody, and lovely to meet everyone. I'm Scott from New Zealand, and very excited to be presenting today. I understand there's a bit of a MIT hackathon on at the moment, so I I know a few students will be getting involved in that. But so today I'm going to talk you through my journey and what we're trying to do with immersive language learning. So I will just get into my slides here. So today I'll just step through sort of from being a learner at school to now being a founder of a language learning website. I'll go through what ImmerseMe actually is today, and look at some of our sort of technology stack, how we're using AI, the future of language learning from what we can see anyway at the moment, and some of the risk challenges and sort of hard lessons. It's always good to go through that, and then obviously Q&A at the end. So this is sort of stepping back in time. This is me in 2005, so 21 years ago. Where am I on here? Somewhere in the back row up here. At my high school, and so this is where I was studying Japanese, and then went off to university. And so fast forward 4 years, this is me graduating university with my mum and dad. And this is the University of Otago in a town called Dunedin, which is at the very south of New Zealand. And at university, I met what was one of the co-founders of now Education Perfect, which is a big online learning platform, which actually started as a language learning platform called Language Perfect. And so Craig and I would do lots of scheming about how we were going to start a business and do lots of fun things together. And then him and his brother actually did found that company, and I got involved as one of their first employees, which was really cool. And so I got an amazing opportunity to learn in a business, and just got involved in a sort of a bootstrapped company at the very beginning. So we got to travel all over the world, showing teachers, this is in Darwin, how to use our technology. And so this started about the same time as Quizlet. If you're looking back at a bit of a time scale, it was about 2000 and I'm going to say 7, I think we first started it, 2007, 2008. And so I got an amazing opportunity to learn firsthand what it's like to be in a company, and in a technology company, and education technology company as well. And so we got to travel around the world teaching teachers how to use it, which was an amazing experience. So very thankful to that opportunity. And I'm actually catching up with Craig in a couple of days. And I'm sure he'll be excited to hear what I've been up to most recently as well. So this is just some highlights from my early career. This is meeting our Prime Minister of New Zealand. You won't recognize this man, but he was one of the Prime Ministers we've had. This was actually how we got to work in Dunedin. No, it wasn't very common that it snowed where we lived, but when it did, we got pretty excited. And so I managed to snowboard to work one day. And I know that a lot of people have got a lot of snow around them at the moment. It's the summertime here, but this was a very big highlight for me. And traveling to places like the FIFA World Cup. Certainly all of this travel you can see starts to really motivate me and inspire me to do more and more with language learning. This was our team back in 2011 and 2013, 2015. So you can see it starting to grow. And then I sort of decided, all right, I want to go traveling. I want to see the world. And so I actually had one of my last days at EP, they put on a bit of a party for me. It was pretty epic. And then I got to kind of grow out a bit of a beard because I didn't have to shave every morning, and got to see the world again, and this time just as a tourist. And it was really awesome to go out and explore the world. And that's really what I want to sort of inspire in all of our learners, is that the world's your oyster. And if you can take an interest in some languages along the way, that'll make that journey more richer and more enjoyable, and help build some confidence. So this is sort of some of the highlights of my travels, taking a year off and exploring Italy, Switzerland, Croatia. Some of you may have seen the Game of Thrones. That's the actual Game of the Throne from the Game of Thrones set, which is pretty cool. Nepal, that's Mount Everest, up here in the background, with the clouds over it. We're sort of on the other side of the valley, but it was pretty amazing getting up and looking at that every morning. Did some fun things like, well, fun. This is Ironman. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're a sucker for punishment, but when you're young and foolish, you get into some of these things sometimes. So that was definitely one of my highlights. And that's Craig, the Education Perfect founder, on the left there, and one of my best mates on the right. And these are some of the cool activities you can do in New Zealand. If you come down, skydiving is definitely a highlight. Another highlight from my life is just meeting Richard Branson. He was always a huge inspiration, a bit of a hero, as an entrepreneur, but also as a person. Just seemed really genuine. And I got to meet him at one point in Auckland, and sort of cheekily offered him a job, said, would you like to come and work for us? Flipped it around on him. And he sort of looked at me like, well, I've never actually worked for anyone before, but yeah, sounds good. So he had actually accepted. And so I haven't actually sent him a job description yet, but I probably should. And another highlight was probably meeting someone like Bear Grylls. When I was in my sort of teens and 20s, he was someone that was sort of out there doing stuff, and motivated me and made me excited about getting out into the world and having confidence. And so these are just a few of the people that have had an influence on me, and I'm sure people have got their own heroes and inspirations in life. And if you can get a chance to meet them, they say you shouldn't meet a hero, but you know what? I really loved meeting these guys. This is my daily inspiration. This is my family, mum and dad, my brothers and sisters. I've got 3 brothers and a sister, and they've all got partners and children. This is my little boy Bryn in the front here with a cricket helmet on. He loves his cricket. And that's my wife Bridget there on the left in the dress. And this is us just a few weeks ago over Christmas. And so, yeah, that's a bit about me and my journey, up to the point where ImmerseMe started to happen. So in 2015, I did that big world tour. Got me really excited about language learning, because I'd been involved in language learning for many years before that. And I was like, I think we can do this different. I think we can do this in a more interactive way. And so I sat down, made a bit of a plan, got some friends together that just wanted to see the project happen. And they said, well, we'll support you, and got some two co-founders to be on my board. And then we ran a Kickstarter, and it worked. We managed to raise 23,000 New Zealand dollars. Let me say New Zealand dollars. It's probably about, I don't know, 15,000 US dollars, but it's a lot of money to to someone who needs to get a business up and running and an idea going. And it was actually enough money to pay for all the flights and accommodation that we needed to create the first set of content for ImmerseMe. So it was mostly friends and family that pitched in. And I still think Kickstarter is an amazing tool if you've got a really good idea and you just need some support from friends and family and you want to make it easy for them. Shove it up on Kickstarter, see what happens, get it out to your friends and family, give them opportunities to pitch in, if it's $50, $100 or more, and promote it. And if you get enough to get it going, then that's validation as well. So we used that money and we traveled around making content. So we started in London, and we filmed our first ever English curriculum. And that was the little camera that we use, this little Samsung 360 camera. This little kind of has a lens on each side, which is got a fisheye lens, and it can shoot 180 degrees field of view. And so you put 2 180-degree cameras together and it creates a 360 video. And so we still use this content today, and this is 10 years ago. And so this is traveling around Paris, Greece, Tokyo. These are just some of the highlights from that first content tour that we did around the world. China, Indonesia. And yeah, it's still used by hundreds of schools today. We've supported over 150,000 students with our technology. And it sort of feels like we're only just still getting started. So what I'll do is let's actually have a look at what ImmerseMe is. I've got a video loaded, and sometimes it's easier just to play a few minutes of that.
Alors aujourd'hui, les filles, on va faire ImmerseMe, encore une fois.
Bonjour, bienvenue à la boulangerie.
Bonjour, je voudrais du pain, s'il vous plaît.
Puis voilà, ça fait 1 euro s'il vous plaît.
If you can communicate, then you can start to understand and empathize with other people, other traditions, other cultures, other ways of life.
I'm just really fascinated by French culture. The whole eloquence and the beauty of it is something that's always caught my attention.
Started hearing more and more about virtual reality and how it's an immersive technology, and that was always the word that teachers talked about at language conferences about the best way to learn a language.
Because it challenges me in a different way. So it's like improving my pronunciation and my spontaneous thinking with responses.
Oui, voici mon passeport.
Because it's virtual reality, it feels like you're in an environment.
Bonjour, je voudrais un croissant s'il vous plaît.
That helps me with my confidence, which is quite a big thing when it comes to our interactions, which we have to do, our conversations. And that's what we get examined on in MCEA.
Qu'est-ce que tu as fait le week-end dernier avec ta famille?
Le week-end dernier, je suis allée à la plage avec ma famille.
Because there's so many different nationalities that live here, you know, being able to interact with them, even just saying hello, how are you, would make a huge difference to that person if you're able to say that in their language. We can really lead the world when it comes to multilingual citizens who have an awareness and a basic understanding of potentially dozens of languages. So,
why you should never cook freshly chopped onions. That's strong.
Just turn that off. So, you know, the question is, how many of you have studied a language for years but froze when speaking to a real person? And that's kind of the challenge we're trying to solve. Is that there's lots of language tools out there, and they do lots of incremental things. But how can we bring it all together? How can we make it so that you get dropped into real life scenarios and have to interact, have to listen and speak? Ideally speak. That's the main challenge that most learners have. And that's the one skill that's hardest to develop, because often the ratio of students to teachers is something like 1 to 20 or more, 1 to 30. And so for a student to practice speaking, there's not that many people they can practice with. And so clearly there's a need for some sort of technology solution with that. And if I think, you know, 5-10 years from now, you know, language immersion technology will only get better and be able to provide more opportunities and give more people confidence with their language learning and make language learning an easier subject, because it actually is a pretty difficult one, and it's perceived to be very difficult. So I think we can simplify it and make it easier. So that's the goal. And so, you know, traditional language learning often fails when there's just too much theory, not enough safe or real practice. If you ask someone, what did you learn from French class? They might say, oh, how to conjugate some verbs, but not actually how to just order a baguette in a bakery, in a boulangerie. And so it's like, we're just trying to change the script on that. There's also fear of embarrassment. Languages put you out of your comfort zone and make you feel anxious. And anytime you feel anxious, your fear of embarrassment goes up, and your willingness to communicate drops. And so you might have done 3 years of language studies, but never really had to speak. And when you get put into that situation, you just don't. And it's like, really? 3 years of language study. So, and there's also a lack of cultural context when you're just learning vocabulary and things like that. So we want to bring cultural richness to life through this kind of technology, through this kind of media. So that's a bit of a background about me and what ImmerseMe is today. You're welcome to be asking questions in the chat as we go. I'm not actually looking at the chat. I'll bring it up just in case. But I'll keep on moving forward. So hold on, let me just check my notes here. Actually, just some honest sort of things at the beginning of the journey was it's been really hard. I mean, we've spent 10 years working on this kind of technology, and at the beginning it just didn't really work. You know, like the speech recognition was bad. It didn't pick up people's voices. It certainly wouldn't pick up your voice if you spoke in French and you weren't a native speaker very well. But it's incredible how much it's changed over the last 10 years. So, you know, when we first launched, it sort of felt almost too early. And so you have to be patient. You never can just assume that if you've got a solution, what you think is a great solution to a problem, that people will just flock to it and buy it and use it. So so that was really, really difficult. But we kept going anyway. We tried to make sure that we never were too pigeonholed in one technology stack. So we never just went into sort of a virtual reality experience only. As you could see in that video, we had students logging into laptops and tablets, and they can use it on phones and things, and they can view it from a computer where they can just click and drag the screen around. So that meant that we could be immediately used in classrooms straight away without having extra technology like VR equipment and things like that, which was clunky, which was expensive, which only the top institutions were actually getting access to, and would have really limited our ability to reach learners. So those were some really, really big challenges. And so what ImmerseMe is today is it lets learners step inside, you know, real world conversations and practice speaking with sort of AI-powered and scripted characters in VR and on screen. And so we've gone into lots of different environments all over the world, as you can tell. We went to cafes, restaurants, street scenes, people's homes, train stations, all sorts of places where you would expect to have a conversation with someone about a certain topic. And we've tried to script and role play that scenario for you to be able to practice it over and over, slow it down, replay it, get translations made available for you. And the idea is that you're just breaking down those barriers and making people realize that they can use the language and they can use it in context. We also are working on questions.
Yes, well, question, and also to say I'm just double checking that there weren't some slides that were meant to be moving on, because it was just the slide of the YouTube.
No, yeah,
yep.
That's a good point.
Okay,
I wasn't actually going into any slides, but maybe I'll jump into ImmerseMe as it stands now and use that as a reference point. So let's go into, say, French.
I also
as an
had
example.
a question as well that sort of slightly started answering, actually, and I thought I'd ask it now rather than at the end, because it related to kind of where ImmerseMe is now, and you were talking about the sort of different types of, you know, the VR headsets, or the screens and on mobiles, and I was wondering about if there was if you'd seen any sort of differences in the way people learnt depending on what type of technology they were using, and if there were any kind of barriers to adoption that you found between any of them. I mean, you mentioned around the cost of some of the headsets in some of the schools, but I wondered if there were any other ones as well.
Yeah, I mean, the innovation curve has for VR specific devices has been pretty amazing, really. You know, like when we started, you had to have a tethered headset. People are still using those today, but you had to have a headset which had spatial sensors in the walls, and so you could only have one headset in a room, pretty much, and so you could have one learner engaged in some content. And you had to have a high powered gaming PC to run the first Oculus first Oculus headsets. And so then, you know, the technology became mobile and meant that the headset didn't have to be tethered. It had its own computer inside of it, and it had its own spatial awareness. And so you could now have you could have, say, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people in a room using it. And then the cost came down as well. And so headsets became more comfortable, ran with better graphics, were more mobile, and now you can have sort of shared experiences. And so it's from a VR learning perspective, a lot of that has improved dramatically. And I guess the real key benefit of doing it in a VR device is it just blocks out sort of the distraction of the world that you're in, and just lets you focus purely on the experience of speaking another language, which in and of itself is a really challenging thing to do. So to have that, the ability to focus is really important. And then you've mentioned other devices. So, like, to be able to get a product out there, to get feedback, to get people using it, you really want to meet them where they are today, and that was Chromebooks had just been kind of rolled out into classrooms around the world, and those kinds of devices, iPads and things. So, education technology was starting to really ramp up. And so you needed to reach that audience. And so we sort of decided at the very, very beginning not to just do a virtual reality experience, which would have been the ultimate way to do it, but actually the best way to do it, the smartest way to do it, was to have something that they could use on their laptops. And even though they weren't fully immersed from a technology's perspective, they were still immersing themselves in the language learning. And that's why we use the word ImmerseMe, because we wanted to represent two meanings. One is language immersion, and then on top of that, if you had access to the VR headsets, then it's technology immersion. But the priority is language. The priority has always been language learning. And how do we bring languages to life through technology, and how do we do it in a way that's more contextual, more authentic? And because that was the word, as I said in that video, that language teachers had always hoped for their students, was a full immersion experience. As we know, that's always been the best way to learn a language, but it's time consuming, it's costly to travel and live and go over into a country which speaks a different language. It's just not practical for the vast majority of language learners. And so you've got this huge problem and it's not really being solved on a daily basis. And so I was like, come on, we can try something different here. And so, I can now take a student from rural New Zealand. So we've got a school down in the South Island of New Zealand in Ashburton College. And within 30 seconds, I can have that student logged in and ordering a bento box in Japan, or asking for help in French in outside the Eiffel Tower. And it's like, they're doing it. And it's not necessarily the same as the real thing, but it's as close as we can get at this stage. So did that help answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Alrighty. So, this is just a quick, just view of what we've got in terms of a catalog of content within ImmerseMe. And so you click into a lesson and it loads the 360 view, and you look around and you interact. We are working on a bit of a new interface at the moment. So this is a bit of a sneak peek at our new interface. It's a bit more of a darker themed, just to make things a little bit more sort of cinematic. Oops, I've just timed myself out. I'll just jump back in. And so there's a bunch of new tools and technologies that's going into this. Sorry, I'll just have to load that up again. It timed out before I loaded this presentation, but it's got a new look. It's got a new feel. It's got horizontal scrolling. It's got a new two-stage approach to students learning the language. First, they go through and make all their decisions about what they're going to say, and then they load the lesson. They can focus on speaking and output and fluency. So it's quite cool, because we're using a lot of academic research to inform that development process and make it really science-backed. And so I probably won't be able to demo that at the moment, but I'll get it loaded up in a minute. If I move on to the technology stack, to simplify it, I guess if you think about, say, 3 technologies that we're using, VR being one of them, and I've talked about that a lot, that helps solve the human problem of fear and also sort of lack of realism with the textbooks and resources and tools that are out there at the moment. So we're using VR simply just to solve that human problem. We're using AI now to create speaking partners, because there's a lack of speaking partners. As I mentioned before, there's one teacher to 20 students. There's just not enough opportunities to practice. So we're using AI as a dynamic speaking partner, and that solves the human problem of lack of partners. And then there's sort of the game mechanics technology, and that's to sort of help solve the human problem of motivation and consistency. If anyone's got Duolingo, they'll know that one of the biggest things they focus on is consistency. trying to get you to do something every day to learn a language is much more beneficial than just sitting and studying once a week or once a fortnight. So game mechanics is an interesting technology that we're trying to use to help overcome motivation and consistency. I could dive into sort of more of the technology stack itself, but I think that's probably high level is what we're trying to do. And I guess how we're using AI is, there's an exciting opportunity moving forward. It's a large language model. It's perfect for language learning. It's the dream come true. We can have AI-driven conversational agents, and we can have really, really good speech recognition and feedback. So we can close that loop really quickly. Imagine a tutor is helping you to pronounce a specific part of a phrase a little bit better, a little bit clearer. And at the moment, unless you have a one-to-one tutor, you just don't get that immediate feedback. And so that's a really, really exciting thing for us to be able to do is give students sort of live one-on-one coaching. And that's what AI opens up the door for us to be able to do. It allows us to give you more adaptive difficulty. So if you're starting to really get a really high accuracy, then we can either increase the speed, we can send you to lessons that are a little bit more in depth, and use a lot more language that you maybe is a bit more unfamiliar. We can do scenario branching where we can take you down different pathways and you can really demonstrate the depth of your language knowledge. And then we can present all of that back to your teacher and give them the opportunity to talk to you about it and provide that human instruction as well. So that's really important, that this isn't replacing teachers by any means. It's giving students a chance to practice in a more scalable way. And I mean, humans are always going to matter for everything to do with language learning, to do with cultural context, to do with nuance, to do with emotional encouragement of the learner, and supporting their needs in the classroom and in that program. And so, yeah, we think AI is not replacing teachers. It's just scaling practice. So now that brings me to the future of language learning. I mean, there's obviously some really exciting opportunities to provide personalized learning pathways for students. So whatever they're interested in learning, and we can take them down a pathway where they're picking up basic vocabulary and grammar skills and cultural knowledge, but in a topic or in something that interests them, and providing them that personalized learning experience. We can do AI-powered role play at scale. Like if I had a meeting just 2 weeks ago, or last week, with a school district that has 45,000 language students. And I said, do you have any idea how much those students are speaking? And they were like, no. And it's like, right. So that's what we're talking about in terms of scale. Like this tool could be used by each of those students, and then they would have full oversight over how much time the students are speaking, what the accuracy is like, how much they're learning or improving, how much repetition they're getting. And all of that is just giving them data and insights that they've never had before. And they can use that to reward and encourage those students. So, education or learning is language learning inside context, not classrooms, is kind of a key phrase that we're using at the moment. And education is, I guess, shifting from purely content. So when you think of content, think of like drills and exercises, into experiences and uses of that content. And that's across all other subjects as well. So, in 5 or 10 years, practicing a language without immersion will feel like learning to swim without water. Is one of the metaphors we're using at the moment. So, yeah, I can see that this is really going to take a lot more effort, but we're trying as we go and just making up ideas and having a go. And so some of the challenges I've already mentioned, that the technology didn't work, it was a bit too early. Hardware adoption challenges, there's been skepticism from institutions, there's been hype and then a crash of hype for sort of VR. And that's ongoing, I think that's why we're not purely focused on virtual reality. It's a way of explaining how we do our content, which is sort of 360 experiences. But we're not solely reliant on the hardware of VR for you to use our product. There's obviously issues around AI, ethics, accuracy, all of that kind of stuff. So we're very conservative when it comes to the use of AI, and we limit it, and we moderate it very heavily to ensure that there's safety mechanisms in place for students and teachers. There's obviously still the cost and accessibility of all of this kind of technology. The timing of it is tricky. We're still getting inquiries now from people that messaged us 10 years ago saying, okay, I think we're ready to look at this now. And it's like, wow, okay, that took a while. So you've got to have a multidiscipline approach, multi-platform approach, not just VR only, not just AI only. Think about how you can combine stuff together. So we can combine AI as a conversation partner within our tool, but it's not the only thing that we do. We do scripted conversations that have been filmed authentically with locals and native speakers. And for most beginner or intermediate students, they need a lot of scripting and support and scaffolding. So we can kind of bridge those two worlds, and two is better than one in that sense. So there's a lot of hype at the moment about AI, and people are rightly a bit freaked out about it. So, we're not putting all of our focus on AI, but we're using it as a tool inside of our program. So yeah, if I was to kind of close with a bit of a statement, and then open the floor, I think, to some questions as well. The future of education isn't about smarter content. It's about braver learners. Immersive technology helps people take that first step. So it's a bit of a big call to make, to say it's about braver learners, but really it is. Like, it comes back to us as individuals and what we want to learn and where we want to grow and what we want to do with our lives. And if this kind of technology can help build confidence and build willingness to communicate and to interact, the world's only going to get more connected, and you'll only have more opportunity to travel and see other places. And so we want people to go out there just being able to interact with other humans. Like, fundamentally, this is a human challenge. We want to connect you with other people, not with more technology. So there's a point in time where we want you to stop using the technology and just enjoy each other's company. And so that's just where we're kind of trying to fit into the learning process. It's not the end in and of itself. We actually don't want people to stay on our platform very long. We'd like for them to be able to learn a little bit and then go out and use it. So that's just kind of where we're coming from. There's lots of other ways to do this kind of stuff, but I'm excited to see where it heads and what ideas come out of the students that are at Northeastern, and what ideas they have for making this into a really exciting industry moving forward. So that's probably enough from me. Should we do a bit of a Q&A?
Yeah,
Sian?
thank you very much. Yeah, I have lots of questions. So I'll start off asking some questions, and then if people have questions, they might write them in the chat, or they may ask them out loud. But yeah, really, really interesting, and thank you ever so much for presenting about ImmerseMe. I think you touched a little bit on the sort of people overcoming their anxiety, and I wondered around whether can people change who they are? Can they change their person within ImmerseMe? And can they change who their tutor is in ImmerseMe as well? Can they do any kind of adaptation of who they represent, their representation of themselves within the technology at the moment? Or is that something that it's not there, or might be down the line, or something you've ever considered?
Yeah, that's certainly something down the line. It's something that we're sort of setting ourselves up to be able to do. Yeah, I mean, when you learn another language, you kind of have to take on the role of a character. You have to pretend to sort of be a different version of yourself, right? A version that's detached somewhat from your sort of base language or native language, and play the role of a student that's trying to speak a different language. I actually use that analogy myself whenever I think about, when I'm practicing other languages. I just try to imagine myself as almost like a different person. I don't know, it helps me to do that. But Yeah, I think there's so many avenues for customization and personalization with this kind of technology, and that students can, they can say, I want my conversation partner to look like this or sound like this or whatever, and that's what the AI technology will be able to rapidly do and respond to. So yeah, it should be fun. Like it should be really cool.
Yeah. I wanted to
Leanne.
whether like different contexts. So I noticed there was the comedy store, and I was thinking, sometimes you'll go in and it'll be, a business environment, and so you want to go in and you want to talk to somebody that's, and you're going in a suit and you're going in to kind of meet somebody, and then the next day you might be going and just doing a bit of shopping, or and then you're kind of a stand-up comic, so I think that's really interesting, the kind of different kind of context that you could choose from. So and as you say, you're sort of acting out a role as you're talking, and needing different types of language to fulfill that role. Yeah, really interesting. Okay. If anybody else has any
Looks like
questions.
Leanne has a question, so she's...
Yeah, perfect.
Hi, thank you so much, Scott. I am really interested in what you're doing, in part because I put together a research project now a couple of years ago that we published on a pilot where we're immersing older adults who are not believed to do very well in language learning, particularly immersion-based language learning. They did very well. While they're cycling. And so there's actually a really interesting literature on and this is kind of like, it's not huge, so I don't really know what to make of it, but it goes something like this, that as we tend to say that children learn best, and the argument is for all these plasticity reasons, but the argument might be that our overly active and evaluative frontal cortex, and I'm a neuroscientist, so I say that and I cringe, but aspects of our brain that are always like evaluating our performance get in the way. And so two ways of kind of getting rid of that. One has been tried all over the world, and that is drinking alcohol while speaking a second language. As a scientist, I can't really recommend that and do studies on that. But the second way, which really lines up well with my primary appointment, which is in physical therapy, the second is in games, is exercise. And the idea is that exercise kind of like, it just wears you out a little bit, it lowers your barrier, and also it's been shown to promote learning. So what we did is created a virtual bike tour where you are actually talking to someone and he's asking you to repeat things, but it's like super bare bones compared to what you've done. And I'm wondering if have you any interest in partnering with research to try these things out? Because to me, the thing that stopped us is so I've got this really cool idea of making all these maps around a fake city and scaffolding language, but I'm not a language learning expert. I don't know how to make multiple lessons, but you've got sticky content, and that's actually what's needed. So they play off each other, right? I want to get somebody back on the bike because it's good for them to exercise and good for them to learn language, but they've got to want to get back on the bike. So this is what I'm really interested in doing, and I'm wondering if there's a way that perhaps we can work together.
Yeah, let's chat. I mean, we know a lot of language teachers that I think would really enjoy having students participate in this, especially if we can get some exercycles down at a local gym or something like that. That would be pretty cool. And I agree. I mean, I'm a huge fan of exercise, as you can tell. Stupid enough to go out and do a long triathlon is, and I think every day I have to do something to keep myself physically fit, and it just helps my mental capacity and mental health as well. So I know that there's a link there, and I think that's a good idea to explore for sure. We can collaborate on that.
Yeah, I'd love to connect. I guess I'm sure Eileen has or Sean has your connection. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. I can put my our just general inquiry email into the Zoom chat anyway. Just hello@immerseme.com will get to me, as well as anyone in the team that sort of is interested in that as well. So
thank you.
I think Celia had a thank you, Leanne.
Celia, your hand up, yeah.
I'm sorry. I've been going through between Teams and Zoom all day, and all the buttons are in different places. Thank you. That was delightful. I love you're so positive. It was great listening to you talk about this. I had a couple of things. One was, is this available for individuals?
Hmm. Yeah,
Great, because
yeah, it
I
is
want to
actually.
learn some languages, and I think I would like to try it. Um, I also wanted to say that I really appreciate that you're using 3D film. I feel
Hmm.
like this is very underutilized in the XR space right now.
Yeah,
And some of the best things I've seen use it. I don't know if
yeah,
Natalie's in the call, but Natalie Mate, who's on our Oakland campus, has made a beautiful
yeah.
immersive film piece about bias where you switch back and forth between two conversations, all of which is filmed. So I love that you're using that. I think that's great. And then my final comment was just I'd love to hear a little bit more what you're saying about the emotional content, the idea of I'm a game designer, and I know that we know that simulation and practicing things, especially without a person, this has worked with
Hmm.
virtual therapy, for instance, can actually get rid of a lot of inhibitions. So I was wondering just a little bit more about like how much research you've actually done. Are there certain metrics that you use for success, for the ability of simulation to reduce people's anxiety and stuff like that? Are you working with any theories coming in from other scholars? I'm just curious, sort of your thoughts about that whole space of um, practice as a way to mitigate anxiety.
Mitigate. Yeah, I mean, that was actually one of the very, very first sort of challenges that we faced, and it was, you could see it really happening in front of you in a classroom as soon as you walked in and you said, "Hey guys, we're all going to get you speaking French today." Everyone's like, and then you'd within a few minutes they're actually like, oh, I can do this. I've just spoken, like I've just ordered a coffee in Paris. And so you saw the initial like anxiety and the wall, the effective filter wall going up. And so we pretty quickly got connected with some amazing researchers. So Kevin Puppin from Montreal, he was at McGill University at the time. He reached out and said, "This is great. I think this is a great way to test anxiety and willingness to communicate and self-perceived communicative competence. So how well you think you can speak." So he set up this incredible study. He actually went out. He wanted to really control the whole thing, and he actually went out. I showed him how to create content, and he made 3 exact scenarios that his students living in Montreal would encounter in local shops around the university. And so he went and got these shops involved in filming scenarios that these students come in and they have to order food or a drink or go to the local grocery store, and filmed the exact places these exact students would be going, and then ran studies on those 3 factors. And it was great. I mean, he proved with statistical significance that by practicing those scenarios in a risk-free environment such as ImmerseMe, had a statistically significant impact on lowering anxiety whilst increasing willingness to communicate and self-perceived communicative competence. And it's not really rocket science. I mean, it makes sense, but it was great that he did that study and came up with those results. So yeah, that was one of the first studies we
Is
ever
there
did.
can you share a publication with us with that finding? That's really cool.
Yeah, we've got a sort of a page that's got all of the studies we've been involved in. And I'll just drop a link into the chat. And it does go through a little bit more about just the underlying pedagogy and academic research behind ImmerseMe. I can share my screen actually as well. It starts off just sort of assuming that maybe someone's arriving at that page without necessarily understanding some of the technical jargon. So things like TL for target language and BL for base language, and then what actually is pedagogy. And so we just go through that initially, but then there's a lot in here. I mean, we talk about ImmerseMe having a kind of a big impact in the middle of the learning process. So there's sort of a lot that happens pre-ImmerseMe. You're taught fundamental things about languages from your teacher and culture and content and all that kind of stuff. And then at some point, we just need you to practice. So it sort of sits in that middle phase where you're practicing, you're building your autonomy, you're building your spontaneity, you're building your recall and speed of recall, and you're needing to kind of reinforce and repeat content. So there's obviously repetition required to kind of move it into sort of long-term memory. And then past ImmerseMe is like actually using it outside of the classroom environment. And so that's where we sort of sit in that middle section. So there's a whole lot of conference presentations from all over the world talking about different aspects. So this is assessing the impact of AI on student communication in German. You've got Virtual Worlds, Real Insights, exploring student reflections from ImmerseMe at Purdue University, Old Dominion University and Purdue University collaboration. There's a whole lot of things in here that you can check out. This is a really interesting one here, Suzanne Hill. She's a teacher in Australia, and she did an action research at her school, and she found that the class that used ImmerseMe had a 15% increase in their speaking proficiency. 15% increase is a pretty significant jump compared to the rest of the classes that weren't using ImmerseMe to practice for their speaking assessment. That's the difference between like a B and an A, you know. And then if I go all the way down to here it is, Dr. Kevin Puppin. This is the paper, the Eurocool paper on it, and then he's also got his research findings in his slideshow here, and yeah, has found that ImmerseMe had a statistically significant impact on those three factors on slide 16. So you're welcome to check it out. I think Leanne had another question, or Sian, you've probably got.
No, I was going to say Leanne's got her hand up.
So just really quick, is it always English to another language, or do you have, and I'm sorry if I missed it, because we had some interest in local Mandarin speakers who wanted to learn English. Do you do that?
Yep, good question. Yes, we do. And actually part of our new interface design is setting ourselves up for pretty much any interface language. So any language to any of the ones that we specifically teach. So we have to go out and create content for the language you want to learn. So we've only got like 12 languages that you can learn at the moment: Mandarin, English, French, German, all of that. But we want to make the interface suitable for whatever base language you natively speak. And so the three main languages that we'll focus on to start with, just to get something up and running, it will be Spanish, French, and Chinese Mandarin. Which interestingly is now being, the word Mandarin is Putonghua is now being used as the standard form of Chinese language. And so you may hear the word Putonghua, which means common tongue, a lot more than Chinese Mandarin, but that's just a little thing that I've learned recently. So yeah, we'll make those three base languages available pretty soon. In fact, you can already get translations in those languages. But the whole interface will be able to be modified into that language, so you can interact with all the buttons and everything in your base language.
Wonderful, thank you.
One final question for me, unless there's any other questions in the chat or anybody else has a question. My question kind of follows on. Actually, it was I was interested in kind of the usage patterns of your technology, and that, and also the sort of cultural variations, because this is in, I know that it's used in the UK, and it's used in all over the world. Do you do any kind of data analysis about how it's used? Are there any patterns around its usage? Certain countries like certain things, certain sort of age groups are looking for certain things. So yeah, how's your sort of data usage patterns sort of working out?
Honestly, we've got so much data, and I'd love for more researchers to reach out to us to try and interpret it, because there's just so much, and I just don't have time to try and answer all these questions. But yeah, like we do, and we could tell you the most popular lessons and things, and it's usually the ones that are like out and about doing interesting things, like ordering food and going shopping and buying bread at the bakery and getting food at the restaurant and asking for directions and things, and like famous locations and all of that kind of stuff, right? So those are definitely the most popular. That's the most popular content, and the stuff that it's hardest for a language teacher to sort of replicate without having students, actually see it. And then, but I mean, we're trying to sort of develop content for such a wide range of people and motivations. And I mean, that's just still with an academic lens. So we support mainly late elementary, I'd say. So like grade 5 and 6 would be the earliest we'd start students, I would say. And then a lot of middle schoolers, a lot of high schoolers, a lot of college and, university learners and vocational learners who are all pretty much at like the beginner or intermediate level. So that's like kind of the common thing across all of our user base. And we do have a lot of adult learners as well that are using it for business purposes and things, and travelers as well. But I'd say they're all at sort of that beginner / early intermediate level where they're trying to establish confidence. And that's why anxiety and willingness to communicate are such important factors to research. And so that's who we're sort of trying to work with. And we're not at the moment sort of trying to compete with, say, Duolingo, who have like millions of learners, individual learners around the world. We're very much designing this as a supplementary tool for a language classroom where you've already got a language teacher who can introduce you to the content and introduce you to the language, but they need you to practice as well. So that's kind of our focus. And in terms of data, I mean, we're soon with this new version, we're going to be collecting like every single word you record. We'll be able to sort of give it a rough accuracy threshold, and we'll be able to basically log all those words and the repetition of those words, and we'll be able to show you your own personalized vocab bank and your own trends over time as to how you're actually improving in the language. And hopefully this will be really empowering for the learners, because they'll be able to see actually within one lesson on our site, this beginner student has already logged like, say, 20 or 30 words. And this may be their first ever lesson in the language. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've got 20 words I've used already. That's amazing, And then the next lesson they're up to 100. And so we want to show you how you actually are growing with the language, and every incremental step is actually adding to what you know, rather than looking at language as a mountain to climb. We want you to see it as just like little incremental steps, and build confidence rather than like shoot people down because they don't know the whole language or enough to be conversational. Because that's the framing that gets used. Is as soon as you say you're learning a language, people straight away ask, oh, are you fluent? And it's like you suddenly put this expectation on this learner to be able to do way more than they possibly could. And it's like saying to a student that's first learning how to count, yeah, but are you a rocket scientist? You'd be like, what? I'm just learning how to count, So we're just trying to change the dialogue around the framing that a language learner has to go through. And hopefully this will help.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much. That's been really interesting to hear. I'm going to hand over back to Eileen now. But yeah, thanks again. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm sure everyone will join me in a nice round of applause. So fascinating to hear this. I'm definitely going to follow up and read a lot of the research. It really aligns with a lot of the work that I've been doing on learning with virtual reality too, in partnership with Leanne as well. So just fantastic to see this out in the world helping learners. So just to wrap up, thank you everyone for joining us for this XR Speaker Series. This is the first of 2026, and we actually have event pages ready to go, some more complete than others for the rest of the series. So please join us February 5th for the next one. If you click on the link I just put into the chat, it will take you to our page, which has all of the registration links for our upcoming talks. I also want to promote something else our colleagues are organizing, the Spatializing Narrative Conference, which will be February 17th online, which also is, a great place to learn about lots of really cool extended reality projects and art. And last final plug is to please check out our programs in extended realities. So we have a Master's of Science In XR, you can do it through the College of Art, Media, and Design with me, or we have programs grounded in health sciences, business, computer science, and engineering as well. So check those out. And then also a bachelor's in performance and extended reality. So if you really love this stuff, please come join us, study with us, either as a +1 if you're a current NU student, or come join Northeastern. So thank you so much. Oh, and we also, the Excite Institute also organizes a lecture series on games, which Natalie and Celia are organizing. So please, at that link, you will also find the talks for the game series too. So thank you again so much, Scott. It was wonderful to hear about your work. Thanks for everything that you do. And we're excited to keep learning more and hear about it.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.